8 months ago, I bought a crumbling house for $700, 0 cents in Louisiana, instead of paying for my sister's $11,000, 0 cents spiritual awakening retreat in Costa Rica. And that was the exact moment my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, without the slightest hesitation, "Then go live in the trash you just bought." That sentence didn't just sever me from what used to be called family. It exposed the entire value system I'd been force-fed since I was a child. But what they didn't know was that the pile of rubble they scorned ended up saving me, and that house, in the strangest, most stubborn way possible, became the foundation for the person I never dared to imagine I could become. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever had to choose your dream over someone else's approval, hit that like button and stick around. My name is Jenna Carter. I'm 26 years old. I was born into a family that prided itself on being well-mannered and principled, but somehow those standards only applied to me, not to my sister Savannah. I was the responsible older daughter, while Savannah was the family's shining star, always coddled, protected, and treated like someone far too delicate to ever be held accountable. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a home where appearances always mattered more than truth. My father, Harold Carter, worked as a senior accountant for an insurance firm, and my mother, Lynette, was a PTA woman through and through, organizing church events, charity fundraisers, and never missing a single opportunity to show off to her friends about how successful The only problem? That ideal never included me. From a young age, I was used to standing in Savannah's shadow. She was radiant, naturally artistic, and always referred to by our mother as the light of the family. Savannah took ballet, painting, meditation, pottery, each month a new passion, and each time my mother was more than happy to buy her the best tools, hire private instructors, even invite her friends over for little exhibitions to showcase Savannah's creatives. And me? I was good at math, studied hard, and always remembered to submit scholarship applications on time. I knew how to fix a leaking faucet, change a light bulb, and survive on $40, 0 cents a week during college without asking for help. But all of that was seen as nothing more than duties. If I got high grades, my mother would say, "Good. That's what you're supposed to do." If Savannah got a B, might have sent her to Mission Sculpture, my mom would invite the whole extended family to see it and post an entire photo album on Facebook. Her house felt like a stage. The living room was always styled according to the latest trends in home decor magazines. The flowers in the vase had to be real. The rugs had to be replaced every 3 months, though no one ever walked barefoot indoors. And the stories hidden behind those pristine white walls, never to be spoken, emotions, conflict, or injustice, everything had to be sealed away, labeled as bringing shame to the family if it ever dared to cross the line. I didn't know when exactly I started to surrender. Maybe it was the year Savannah got a brand new Jeep for her 18th birthday while I was still driving Grandma's old car that sometimes died in the middle of the road. Or maybe it was the time I tried to ask my parents for help with the deposit on my first apartment after college, only to have my mother reply, "You're a grown woman now, you need to be independent." But just a few months later, Savannah announced she wanted to take a gap break to find herself in Sedona, and the whole family treated it like a sacred spiritual journey, funding her without hesitation. Savannah isn't a bad person. But she grew up with the illusion that she deserved everything. Not because of effort, but simply because she was Savannah. She believed the universe would always protect artistic souls, that money would show up when you needed it, as long as someone else was paying the cost behind the scenes. I used to think that if I just stayed obedient, worked hard, and stayed rational, then at the very least I'd be acknowledged. But at 25, still renting a room with 2 chaotic housemates, waking up each morning to a pile of unwashed dishes, and going to bed each night hoping no one decided to throw a party until 2 a.m., I started to feel invisible in my own life. I had a degree, a job, no debt, but not a single space in this world that truly belonged to me. And then I started dreaming of a home, not just another rental, but something that was mine. Something I could touch, build, make decisions about. It didn't have to be pretty. It didn't have to sparkle. It just had to be mine. At the time, I was living with 2 roommates. One was a bartender, the other sold multi-level marketing beauty products. The house was always loud, cluttered, The fridge constantly smelled strange, and every week there seemed to be some kind of healing ceremony happening in the living room. I didn't hate them, but I hated the feeling of not having a single quiet corner just for myself, even just to breathe. And then one day, while scrolling through a list of tax-delinquent properties up for auction, I saw it. A tiny brick house with peeling walls, a backyard full of overgrown weeds, tucked away in a worn-down working-class neighborhood in North Baton Rouge. Starting bid, $700, 0 cents. I almost thought it was a typo. But no, it was real. I went to see it in person. The house was, without a doubt, a mess. Cracked ceiling, broken windows, the kitchen floor sagging in one corner. But beneath all the rot was a solid frame. The foundation hadn't shifted, and the plumbing could still be salvaged. I called Luis, a college friend who now worked in construction, and asked him to come take a look. He walked through it, inspecting carefully, then said, "If you've got time and patience, this place is livable. It's not dead, it's just waiting for someone to bring it back to life." I sat in my car for over an hour after leaving the property. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing before a choice that only I had the power to make. I had $12,000, 0 cents in savings, not enough to buy anything decent, but far too much to keep living the way I was, and for just $700, 0 cents. I could have a place of my own. I registered for the auction, joined online, and within 10 minutes, I was the legal owner of that house. I thought I'd panic, but I didn't. I laughed out loud alone in my bedroom surrounded by suitcases and the chaotic thump of music from the hallway. I had bought a house. A few days later, while I was planning the move and figuring out how to start the repairs, I got a video call from Savannah. Her face was glowing with energy, her hair braided in a bohemian style, with candles and incense burning behind her, clearly in the middle of a healing circle. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Jenna, I just got accepted into the Healing the Divine Feminine retreat in Costa Rica. They only take 10 people per cycle, and I got in. I've already paid $5,500, 0 cents, but I still need the other half. Mom said you might be able to cover the rest, right? You always said you'd support me if I found something I was truly passionate about, didn't you?" I was stunned into silence for a few seconds. Then I exhaled and said gently, "I can't. I just bought a house." Savannah's eyes widened. "What?" I repeated, slower. "I bought a house. A tax auction property, super cheap. $700, 0 cents. But I'm going to fix it up. It's mine." A strange silence fell between us. Savannah looked at me like I was joking. But when she saw my face stay completely still, the laughter froze on her lips. And that was when the storm rolled in. I brought the news of my house to Sunday family dinner, hoping, maybe just a tiny bit, that they'd be happy for me. It was a tradition my mother had upheld since I was in middle school. Every Sunday the whole family would sit down together, eat meals that were always far more elaborate than necessary, and discuss politics, health trends, and of course Savannah's life. Out that night, I wore my olive green cotton dress, the only thing that made me feel remotely comfortable while surrounded by my mother's velvet chairs and faux crystal chandeliers she adored. I brought a printed copy of the house deed, along with a few phone photos, blurry and dusty, sure, but to me, they were the beginning of an entirely new chapter. I waited until we were done with my mom's French-style pot roast. As people reached for bread and Savannah was recounting a spiritually guided dream that led her to Costa Rica, I placed the paper in front of my father. I wanted to share some good news. I just bought a house. The table went completely silent. My mother frowned, as if I'd just said something obscene. My father looked up, eyes skeptical. "Savannah?" Savannah scoffed. "You mean like a real house? Not like an Airbnb or something?" "It was a tax auction," I replied. "It's already tax auction. The renovations, Luis is helping," Savannah shrieked. "Oh my God, Jenna, that area has rats and junkies. Are you out of your mind?" My mother didn't say anything for 5 whole seconds, the longest 5 seconds of my life. Then she set her wine glass down, turned to me, and delivered the sentence that buried every effort I'd made to reconnect with my family. "You chose to live in garbage, then take responsibility for the smell. Don't bring your recklessness to this dinner table." I felt my throat tighten. My father still said nothing, just glanced from my mother to me, like he was watching a chess game he had no intention of joining. Savannah started fake crying. Her eyes turned red, the kind of half-hearted tears I'd seen 1,000 times. I just want to heal. I thought you'd support me. I wasn't asking for all $11,000, 0 cents, just the rest. My mother gently patted Savannah's back before turning to me. Since when did you become so selfish? You're not the Jenna I raised. No, I replied, not backing down for the first time. I'm not someone you can control anymore. I didn't ask anyone for a dime. I just wanted a place to call my own. No one said a word after that. Dinner ended in suffocating silence. I left without a single goodbye, just the clinking of cutlery in the kitchen as my mother cleared the plates. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 3 days later, I started receiving a wave of messages from relatives. Uncles, aunts, even distant cousins I'd barely ever spoken to. Each one seemed to have heard the sad news about how ungrateful I was. One even wrote, "Savannah is the light of the Carter family. She deserves to be invested in, but you've chosen isolation. What a shame." My mother's friends messaged me on Facebook, calling me the jealous sister living in the shadow of her sister's brilliance, and said I'd chosen darkness over spiritual light. I didn't know where they heard it, but I was sure it came from my mother. Then, my neighbors, people I'd never even spoken to, began texting the old number I'd used to register with the local council, telling me I was embarrassing the neighborhood by buying a house in the slums. Some even sent me links to articles about auction scams, like they were trying to plant seeds of fear in my head. A week later, my mother showed up at the door of the apartment I was still renting. She was carrying a folder stuffed with papers, reports on the area I'd bought in, crime rates, police calls, even outdated photos from Google Map. "You still have savings," she said, her voice sharp, not soft. "You can pull out. There's still time to register Savannah for her retreat. That's the decision that puts family first." Stood there, frozen. I had hoped, some part of me had hoped, that she'd forgive me, that if I explained things clearly enough, they'd understand. But they didn't want to understand. They wanted me to surrender myself to protect the illusion they called a family. A few days later, on my 26th birthday, I received one last gift. A group text from the entire family. "If you still choose that house over Savannah, then you're on your own from now on. Don't call, don't text, don't come back." I read the message in silence. Then I switched my phone to airplane mode, and I began packing, getting ready to move into the broken-down house I'd dared to choose over the life they had mapped out for me. My first house didn't have electricity, didn't have running water, didn't even have a proper lock on the door. But at least, it had me, and I had chosen it. I moved in just after my birthday, carrying with me an air mattress, a flashlight, a mini gas stove, and a suitcase of clothes. That first night, it rained. Slow, steady drops, and the tin roof leaked right in the center of the living room. Wind slipped through the cracks in the window frames, making the makeshift curtain a threadbare blanket flutter like a horror movie scene. But I wasn't afraid, felt free. Until I started realizing I was being isolated, in the most literal sense. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, missed calls, emails. Not from friends, but from relatives, my mother's acquaintances, even strangers from the extended family. One cousin who lived in New Jersey messaged me with a righteous tone. "You've betrayed an entire community that loves you. Your sister is the light, and you're just the jealous shadow. You should make this right while you still can." A former classmate I hadn't spoken to since college suddenly sent a message. "I heard from my mom that you abandoned Savannah to chase some abandoned house dream. How did you get so heartless?" Each message felt like a needle stabbing my sense of dignity. I had tried to live a decent life, independent, responsible, never asking anyone for anything, and now I was being painted as a traitor, an ingrate, a cold-hearted villain, all because I chose not to fund my sister's retreat. Then I discovered something even worse. My family had reached out to someone at the bank, specifically a friend of my father's, to check my account balance. I had no idea how they managed it, but then I got a message from my mother, just one line. "You still have $11,823, 0 cents. Don't lie and say you can't help Savannah." Felt sick. It was like every boundary I had was being stripped away by the shadows I'd tried to step out from. My own family, the people I thought would at least hold on to some shred of respect, had decided that my privacy, my autonomy, didn't matter. I blocked my mother's number. She immediately used my aunt's phone to message me. When I blocked that, she emailed. When I didn't respond to the email, she had Savannah post an Instagram story tagging me, saying, "I don't need pity. I just need a sister who won't turn her back when I need her most." That story spread faster than I expected. A few mutual friends started going quiet. Some unfollowed me. Some reacted with sad emojis. No one asked for my side. They just saw a teary-eyed younger sister talking about her dream being crushed, and an older sister who bought trash and chose to isolate herself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to write it all out. But I knew if I explained, there would only be two outcomes. Either they wouldn't believe me, or they'd chalk it up to personal resentment. And I didn't want to live my life as one long apology. During that time, I camped out in the wreck of a house I now called home. I slept on the floor, bathed with cold water boiled in a kettle, and used a flashlight to read at night. I ate instant noodles, cold sandwiches, and sometimes walked to a nearby cafe to use Wi-Fi for work. I had no TV, no washing machine, no heater, but for the first time in my life, I had a space no one could invade. Still, each night when the sun disappeared, when the wind hissed through the cracks in the wall and the streetlight cast its glow across the peeling paint, I'd quietly ask myself, am I wrong? That question haunted me until one June afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, wiping down an old window frame, getting it ready for new glass, when I heard a car pull up, a familiar sedan. My parents' car. They stepped out without warning. Savannah wasn't with them. My mother wore a white dress and carried a stack of papers. My father followed behind, silent as always. She placed the papers on the porch steps and delivered her words like a sentence. "If you come back now, I'll forget all of this. But if you say no again, don't ever think of yourself as my daughter again." I said nothing. I looked at the stack. Retreat invoices, a cost estimate for Savannah's psychological, and a letter signed, "From those who love Jenna but are disappointed she's forgotten what's sacred." Stood up, picked up the papers, and dropped them straight into the trash bag beside me. My mother stared at me like I'd just splashed holy water in her face. But I didn't need to say anything else. I had made my choice. Not to fight them, but to stand with myself. That night I sat in my unfinished house, eating a cold sandwich, and wrote a single line in my journal. I am not broken. They just can't accept that I've stopped asking for permission to exist. I woke up on a hot summer morning, my hair sticky with sweat from the lack of air conditioning, and my foot aching from stepping on a broken tile in the old kitchen. And instead of cursing the universe, I smiled. I was beginning to see the beauty in the mess I used to fear. Luis came back to help me rebuild the house from the ground up. He didn't call me crazy for choosing this place. On the contrary, he said, "Everyone wants a pretty house. You're the kind who creates beauty out of ruins." We started with the basics, patching the leaking roof, replacing windows, fixing the toilet, stripping away the torn wallpaper from the 80s and uncovering a layer of stunning vintage tiles underneath. Every corner we cleaned felt like clearing out a piece of my own worn-down history. At first, I lived like a camper in my own home. But then something strange happened. The neighbors started to notice. An elderly woman named Miss Lorraine lived across the street, a retired school teacher with silver hair who watered her plants every morning at 6 and was the first to nod and greet me each day. One morning, she brought over a few sweet pastries and said, "I can see you're doing something that matters. Don't let them convince you you're wrong." Then came the newlywed couple next door, Angel and Marco, immigrants from Honduras, who brought over a stack of leftover bricks and told me to use them if I needed. Then there was Mr. Ed, a retired electrician, who offered to rewire parts of my house in exchange for a cup of black coffee. A community began to take shape. Not loud, not boastful, but quietly present. People simply showed up when they saw someone trying, and in this dusty, low-infraknown, seemingly forgotten neighborhood, I felt more welcomed than I had in over 20 years under the roof I once called home. I decided to start documenting the renovation process, just for myself at first, to track progress. I filmed everything on an old phone, edited the clips roughly, and uploaded them to TikTok and Instagram with the caption, "The girl with the $700, 0-cent house, and a dream that didn't ask for permission." At first, the views trickled in slowly, but then a video of me repainting a window frame with flecks of old paint in my hair and smeared on my hands suddenly caught fire. Someone commented, "My family also called me crazy for buying a fixer-upper, but now I'm doing just fine and happy." Hundreds of others began sharing similar stories, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. My channel started gaining followers, not overnight, but steadily. Every day I'd get messages from women, young, old, single moms, students, women who'd been divorced, all of them labeled rule breakers for daring to choose their own path. I started calling my weekends rebuild myself days. I sketched out plans on the wall, dividing each area: the living room, reclaimed wood floors; the kitchen, mustard yellow mixed with gray in a mid-century modern style; the bedroom, handmade shelves from pallet wood. Every time I finished a corner, I rewarded myself with a cup of hot tea and a jazz track playing through my cheap blue speakers. Not everyone would understand that kind of happiness, but I did. One afternoon, I was editing a video, my face smudged with dust, paint on my shirt, when an email popped up from a small DIY brand based in Austin. They wanted to partner on a wood glue promotion, offering me $250, 0 cents for a tutorial video. I laughed until tears ran down my cheeks. From the girl once labeled a failure living in trash, I was now getting paid to teach people how to fix up a home. I still had a bit of savings, but now I used it like a real investor, buying only the tools I truly needed, prioritizing safety, and not spending on anything that didn't bring long-term value. I learned how to patch walls, paint evenly, replace pipes, even install anti-theft locks from scratch. All thanks to YouTube, new friends, and sleepless nights spent fumbling through trial and error. And during that phase, I realized I had never really lived before. I used to think being an adult meant having a stable job, saving money, and not bothering anyone. But now, adulthood, for me, meant having the right to tell my own story and rewriting it with my own two hands. By the 4th month, I decided to host a real housewarming party. This time, it wasn't just cookies and lemonade, it was a full meal: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, Southern-style salad, soft jazz playing from the new speaker I bought after landing my 3rd TikTok partnership. I hand-wrote each invitation, stuck little welcome home notes onto paper cups, and lit scented candle lanterns lining the walkway. New friends came in droves: Luis and his crew, Miss Lorraine with a homemade cherry pie, Angel and Marco bringing a handmade lamp crafted from a glass bottle. People chatted, laughed, snapped selfies in front of the paper flower wall where I'd hung before and after renovation photos. I was holding a plate of fruit when I heard the sound of sudden brakes out front. A familiar silver Lexus SUV pulled up by the curb. I froze when I saw my parents step out. No warning, no message, no request to come. But there was something different about them. An awkwardness that didn't match people coming to pick a fight. My mother wore a white blouse, my father his usual office shirt, both glancing around as if trying to make sense of the world they had just entered. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping my expression neutral. "Jenna," my mother said, her voice a beat off. "We were driving by, saw all the cars out front, so—" "This is a housewarming party," I replied, gently but clearly, "for the house you once called garbage." My father glanced around, the string lights, the clean yard, the freshly painted olive green door. He gave a small nod, saying nothing. My mother peeked inside, where a tiny buffet spread waited. Guests laughed and chatted. Fresh flowers glowed under soft golden light. She hesitated. "The house doesn't look as bad as I expected." I didn't invite them in. I just sent them away, either. I just stood there, waiting to see what they would do when they no longer had the power to intimidate me, when I was no longer the obedient daughter awaiting their verdict. Savannah hadn't come with them. I knew that wasn't a coincidence. "Maybe I was wrong," my mother said, like every word was its own battle. "But you? You did it." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked back to the table, refilled the pitcher, and said, like any simple invitation, "If you want fruitcake, there's still some left, but you'll have to wait in line like everyone else." That night, as my parents sat in the corner of my home, the home they had once spat on like it was a stained, I didn't tremble. I wasn't waiting for an apology, a redemption hug, or even a single tear of regret. I simply poured them tea, placed it gently on the coffee table I had built myself, and welcomed them as I would any first-time guest. "Ginger or mint?" I asked. My mother paused, then said, "Ginger." I poured the tea, added a few slices of lemon with care, and smiled. Believe it or not, this kitchen was once a moldy wreck. I had to pry up every tile and scrub with my bare hands until the skin peeled just to get it clean. My father looked around, as if noticing everything for the first time. The bookshelf made from salvaged wood, the linen curtains I'd sewn myself, a flourishing money plant placed where the morning light poured in. I didn't need to tell them I had done it all myself. They could see it. And for the first time, my mother's gaze wasn't sharp or judgmental but cautious, like she had just realized her daughter had grown up without needing permission or approval. All evening, I didn't mention Savannah. Neither did they. And to me, that was a quiet, resolute victory. The next day, I got a message from my mother. Just 8 words. "That paint color in your kitchen is tasteful. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm proud of you. No, I miss you." Just a comment about the kitchen wall color. But I understood. This was the first time she saw me as a woman with taste, with capability, with value, not just a blurry shadow standing behind my sister. Few days later, my dad messaged me. It was a private text, no C to my mom like always. He asked, "Do you still have the sketch of your living room plan? I'm curious where you learned to draw floor layouts." I sent him the draft, and he replied, "The way you positioned light and airflow better than most projects I've seen at the firm." I didn't need more than that. No interrogation, no sarcasm, no passive-aggressive pity. They saw me, and that alone was something I'd never had before. A week later, Savannah followed my TikTok account. I noticed the familiar name scroll past in my followers list, @soulflow_sav. No message, no comment, just a quiet signal she was watching. I didn't follow back, because for the first time, I wasn't living inside the weighty circle called the responsible older sister. I was no longer the one who had to rescue, cushion, or serve as the backdrop for someone else's impulsiveness. I wasn't paving a path for anyone anymore. I was the one building this home brick by brick, tier by tier, with a kind of courage I hadn't even known I possessed. Their silence no longer triggered panic in me. Their wordless acknowledgement showed me something deeper. I didn't need to shout to be seen. I just needed to live truthfully. Retaliation isn't always yelling back. Sometimes, it's the calm of sipping tea in the very kitchen they once mocked and letting them realize on their own that they were wrong. Every morning, as sunlight filters through the new window I installed, casting a glow on the pale wooden floor I sanded and polished myself, I feel grateful that I didn't give in. I began receiving more brand collaborations on TikTok. My account, @JennaBuildSlowly, hit 40,000 followers after a video showing how to build a shelf from pallet wood went viral with over 1 million views. Some called me the queen of budget homes. Others messaged for advice on renovating their first apartment. I'm not a professional, but I'm real. And I think that's what makes people stay. A local building supply brand sent me a new gardening tool set for filming. A regional furniture chain invited me to speak at their real estate expo to share my story of turning trash into a home. I wore my old white button-up, the one with the faint paint stains, stood on a small stage with a mic in hand, voice shaking just a little. But as I began to tell my story, from the day I bid on a $700 0-cent house to the day my family disowned me, the room fell completely silent, listening. When I finished speaking, a middle-aged woman approached me, tears brimming in her eyes. "My daughter is trying to break free from our family's control too. Because of you, I understand her better now." I hugged her, and in that moment, I felt that somehow I had helped someone avoid having to spend 26 years learning how to say no. And Savannah? I didn't hear anything from her for a long time, until one day, my mother sent me a message. "Savannah's back home. The retreat wasn't what she expected." No blame, no complaints. Just a quiet update as if my mother had finally realized she couldn't keep making excuses for fragile decisions forever. Eventually, I heard that Savannah had started working part-time at a tea lounge that doubled as a yoga studio in the city. She stopped posting picture-perfect snapshots every day. Her account, @soulflow__sav, began to carry simpler captions, learning to slow down, or breathing instead of running. I wasn't sure if it was a real transformation or just another phase, but I no longer felt. One afternoon, while I was weeding the garden, Savannah stopped by. No warning. She didn't bring anything, just an unfamiliar humility in her eyes I'd never seen before. "You really did it," she said, her gaze drifting across the porch, the little vegetable patch, the string lights I'd hung from the porch to the fence. "You used to tell me I could," I replied. No bitterness, no need to sound triumphant. "I didn't think you wouldn't help back then. But now I get it. I've never really done anything on my own." We didn't say much after that. I poured her a glass of water and invited her to sit at the small table I'd bought at a garage sale and repainted myself. No tears, no hugs, no dramatic reconciliation, just two women sitting in silence. One who had learned how to stand, and one who was beginning to learn how to sit still with herself. A few weeks later, my mother texted to ask if I had time to help her look at some old home listings. "Your father and I are thinking of downsizing. We don't need a big house anymore, just something enough." I stared at that message and laughed. This, from the woman who spent her whole life clinging to the image of the perfect suburban matriarch, now talking about enough? I don't expect my relationship with my family to be perfect. We don't have a Hollywood reunion ending, no sunset photo of everyone holding hands. But I don't need that. What I need are boundaries. And now, I have them. I have a home. Small, old, charming in its own stubborn way. I have real friends, a neighborhood full of kind-hearted people, and a job that makes me wake up each morning feeling like I'm building something that matters. I have a chair on the front porch where I sit every evening, sipping mint tea, listening to the wind rustle across the roof tiles I installed with my own two hands. I didn't choose ease. I didn't choose to settle. I didn't choose Southern in exchange for acceptance. I chose solitude at first. But that solitude led me back to myself. And when you find yourself, everything else begins to follow. On the 1-year anniversary of buying my house, I printed out a before and after photo and framed it, then hung it in the hallway. On one side, a cracked, dusty, abandoned shell of a house. On the other, a sunlit, love-filled home. Beneath it, I added a small note. This house wasn't a ruin. It was the foundation of who I was becoming. And I knew, no matter how long this road would be, I'd never go back to being the older sister who carries it all until she breaks. I am Jenna Carter. I am the woman who was cast out of her family for daring to choose herself. And because of that, I've found everything truly worth keeping.